we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're gonna have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for week one, baby. Here we go. We've been kind of saying it almost every week. We're back, but real football is back.
Right?
It is.
Yeah, we are
so nice.
Back.
It is so nice. But as per usual, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. Like you said, football's back. You know, I've tagged this in my doc as, you know, week one, part one, because that's kind of what it is. You know, we got a couple games we'll talk about, and then next Saturday we'll be back to cover the full slate of next Sunday's week one games. So we won't be going in depth about all those games, but we will be able to finally make some predictions on some football. And, you know, a lot of the drama that was going on through the offseason got resolved this week finally. There were some decisions made, some contracts signed. It's
Thank
good,
God.
man.
Thank God.
You know, I'm not going to lie. I woke up this morning and I was like, fuck, I wish there was football tomorrow. Like, I want it already. Like, I don't want to wait another week still, but...
Well, luckily for you, there is college football on today and tomorrow and Monday.
There is, but I wanted to see this tomorrow.
You want to see the pro football. I get it. I do. But yeah, it's
Steelers country. Let's weld.
I've no bad.
No, I know.
Stop
it's
that.
So bad. It's so we make these jokes as Steelers fans because on the inside we are crying.
That's like Zach Wilson coming out in his first press conference for the Broncos and being like, "Broncos country, Milf's ride." Like,
that's more suitable.
Oh, 100%.
At least that speaks to his personality.
Yeah.
You know, I can't remember which analyst said it, but Russell Wilson really does not fit the dynamic of what a Steelers quarterback is.
Nope.
It really was just them going, he's the only veteran available that we can afford, so here you go, Russ. We're black and yellow.
I am going to talk about, and like before, when we always do like a 30 to 40 minute pre-meeting before we ever go live, and as I was telling you before, I have some worries about the Steelers that I want to talk about. I also have worries about the Bears that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I know people have thought that I might have been attacking Steelers in previous conversations, and it's not that. But we'll get to a lot of that. We have a jam-packed episode here today, and I think the way that we should start this one is kind of doing what we typically normally do for a lot of the games and kind of getting back into the flow of things. So if you're new to the channel, you're kind of getting this kind of little bit of a taste or sample of what we do every single week. We obviously will continue having a lot of conversations, what we normally do, but kind of talking about some of the predictions. Obviously, the Thursday game and the Friday game, we are going to predict those games here today. That is where I feel like we should kick this episode off here before we start to get into some ranty type streak, because I know you have something that you heard this week that you want to talk about that happened in the world of media. But to kick things off, we predict every single game and we tally it up at the end of the year. I think what we'll actually start to do once we get into this section is we'll actually have a scoreboard with us going forward. But we make predictions, we talk about the game, we'll give you a bet for each of the games, whether it's a player bet. Unfortunately for the bets for these first two games, there's just not a ton of stuff to really kind of dive deep on and go after.
No, this was something we talked about beforehand where, you know, like with player bets, we at least tend to watch trends, and week one, there's not a whole lot of trends happening with players, so it's hard to find player bets that you can really trust or that aren't so weak and like such a low payout bet that it's like unless you're doing like a ridiculous 10 leg parlay for a game, it's not worth it. So that's why it's we'll probably do more intricate bets, more interesting stuff as the weeks progress, but for this week it'll be fairly basic, yeah.
Yeah, so starting us out with the first comeback game of the year, the Thursday night game with the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Baltimore Ravens in Kansas City. This is going to be a really interesting game because a lot of people really thought that the Baltimore Ravens last year were going to be that team that finally was able to kind of knock the Chiefs off, especially with how they were playing. And the Chiefs just kind of walked into Baltimore and said, "Hi, we're going to go to the Super Bowl again. Thanks for giving us our little bit of warm up here, Baltimore." And we all kind of walked away from that game going, yeah, we should have expected that. And it's interesting that we get to see these two teams go off week one because typically the way they do it is they kind of like to preview what could potentially be a Super Bowl matchup, and they choose two AFC teams. Last year we got the Chiefs versus Lions, which almost happened, and it just showed how good the Lions were. And this is going to be a very interesting game to watch.
Honestly, this whole week one, we shit on the NFL sometimes, but I will give the schedule makers their props. This entire week one, they didn't go for that Super Bowl matchup, but they did a lot of really good conference matchups that we could see as divisional round games or conference championship games when we get to the playoffs. They did a really good job selecting the primetime games, especially for this week. I will give them that.
Well, and not only that, a lot of just the games on the day, there's so many storylines that are being talked about. Again, like your Steelers, they're going up against the Falcons. So Arthur Smith going up against his former team. Caleb Williams in his rookie debut for the Bears, he's at home against a team that got better this offseason with the Titans, but is not necessarily a team that is going to really push the boundaries. And it should be like, okay, like this is just kind of his sounding board of the NFL. And there's so many stories that are going to be within this game that are going to be really, really fun, like the Broncos versus Seahawks. That's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to this Chiefs Ravens, it's a rematch of last year's AFC Championship and a potential preview of again this year's AFC Championship match because both these teams are slated to be very good. For myself, I'll start off saying that I like the Chiefs' chances a little bit better in this game. At home, the Chiefs perform well. And the thing with the Chiefs, while they didn't necessarily get wildly better, I know they're going to be missing Hollywood Brown, but the core of this team has stayed fairly similar. And so, for the most part, I think it's going to be business as usual for the Chiefs. Whereas on the other side of the ball, the Ravens, they've had some changes on defense. They've had a big change on offense. They got, the big beast Derrick Henry there in the running back room now. But I think what we're going to see with the Ravens is there's going to be a little bit of that feeling out process for that team because of it. We're not going to have that, cohesion between Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry that by week, 10, we're going to see them really start rolling. I think in week one, we might see a little bit of just hesitancy in some of the handoffs. The plays might not be what we expect. So I just think the Ravens have a little bit more growth that they're going to have to go through over the course of the season, whereas the Chiefs are going to be coming into week one going, look, this is us. We're going to add Hollywood Brown later on. We're going to add this later on. But, they went out and got Juju Smith-Schuster, who I know not a big, name-breaking guy.
Knows the system, knows the team.
Exactly. Won a Super Bowl with them already. So, it's a good guy to add back into that. And then same thing with I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Samaje Perine or whatever. They went and picked him back up as well after the Steelers cut him. And so, another guy who's familiar with the system can bring him in and be like, here you go. You know what you're doing.
Yeah. A lot of things that you were talking about there, I completely agree with. I think the Chiefs, at home at Arrowhead. I know they don't call it Arrowhead. It's Arrowhead. It's kind of like calling Heinz Field whatever the
Acrisure.
yeah. I didn't even remember that name, but it was just yeah. It's what regardless.
Yeah.
I think the Chiefs. I think they did get a lot better on offense. I think having Rashid Rice back for year number 2 after he kind of had that emergence, and we know we've been talking a lot about him this offseason about, the car situation, all this, and that. Those are off-field distractions. I think when he's on the field, he's going to be really, really good. He is this team's number 1 weapon. Adding in a guy like Xavier Worthy kind of gives Patrick Mahomes that Tyreek Hill level speed that he's going to be able to do. And, adding a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster back to this team where he's going to be very much a possession type receiver, this offense is going to be humming. And then I look at the defensive side of the ball. There is not a single level on this 3-phase defense of, the front 7 or the D-line, the linebacking core, and the secondary that I don't like. And, Steve Spagnuolo, the DC, he is phenomenal, and he's going to have that team ready to go. Again, Chris Jones, he doesn't have a contract dispute this year, so he's been locked in the entire offseason. I can't imagine how hungry he is to look at this and go, oh, you guys got Derrick Henry to try to get by me? No. Sit down, young man.
That is just it there, too. I've seen a lot of people talking, Aaron Donald retired this year, and he was kind of that beast on defense that could be that game changer no matter what. And a lot of people are saying, and I have to agree with them, Chris Jones is kind of taking up that mantle now. He is the guy that on his defense, he can completely alter the trajectory of a game because he just has that presence.
Well, I think last year, we've always talked about Aaron Donald, when he was on the field, he was the best defensive player in the NFL. Even when TJ Watt was doing all of his things, it was still the best defensive player in the NFL was Aaron Donald. And I think last year was the only year where we really said to ourselves, okay, he isn't the best defensive player on the field right now. And, there was debates of whether that was TJ Watt. But when it came to the number 1 defensive tackle in the NFL, it was very clearly Chris Jones last year. And that secondary is going to do very well, I think, against the Ravens, let's be honest, lackful receiver room. I know they have a rookie from last year who did okay from the first round, Zay Flowers, but it wasn't something where I looked at it and went, he was a game changer for that Ravens passing offense. Now, I think Derrick Henry, he's going to do very well with Lamar Jackson. That's going to be a tough unit to stop all year long. But I think, like what you're saying, it's going to take a little bit of time. But the biggest thing in this game is the differences from the defensive side of the ball for that Ravens. They lost their DC. He went over to coach the Seattle Seahawks as their new head coach. They lost a handful of players. And frankly, some of the guys that they brought in are a little bit on the older side. It's going to be a situation where I think the defense of the Ravens is going to take a step back this year. And it's going to be really tough for them to slow down this Chiefs passing attack. I think the run attack is going to be slowed down. Roquan Smith, if he's not the best middle linebacker in football, he's the second best behind Fred Warner. I think he's going to have a pretty good day against Isaiah Pacheco. They've always had good matchups against each other, so I'm not really worried about that. But I think the Ravens secondary versus the Chiefs passing attack is really what's going to set this game apart. It's going to be fun back and forth, both ways to go. This is a great way to kick off the NFL season.
100%. This is going to be a fun game to watch. Going to be exciting. I don't think it's going to be a big defensive battle. I think it's going to be a lot of scoring, a lot of explosive plays on offense. It's going to be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, so we also talk about the point spreads and the over-under for the actual game. So the spread in this game is the Kansas City Chiefs at -3. So if you're new to football and you're kind of wondering what that situation is, so the bettors are saying that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win the game by 3 points. And so the reason that it's set for a minus is that the Ravens are -3 points, so Chiefs going to win by 3. So if you want to bet, let's say you choose the under for that game for the Ravens, or you bet the Ravens on the spread, they have to either win the game or lose the game by 2 points or fewer. So 2 or 1. And so for us, we pick the games both on the air quotes money line, so just who we think is going to win the game. Both of us are picking the Chiefs in this one, and then we also choose the spread in these games as well, because it can get fairly interesting. For myself, I'm actually going to choose the Chiefs spread on this one. I think they're going to cover that -3. I think this game is going to be close, but I do think the Chiefs will probably have about a 5-point advantage. For me, that's where I would feel comfortable, just because I think they're going to be a little bit better on that offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm sitting it too. Is it that 3 to 5 range is where the Chiefs are going to win this game by.
So, moving forward to the Friday night game. We have not had a Friday night game to kick off the NFL season. We have had Friday night games before. It happens typically closer to the later portion of the year. And, kind of that is a day that is made up for makeup games. I know in COVID, when we were kind of going through those and we had to have games that were being made up, those were kind of the days that we're kind of doing. I know we have like a Wednesday game during that season, but yeah, Friday, the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles head down to Sao Paulo in Brazil to play a Friday night game. This has a lot of interesting things to talk about, particularly on the outside of the actual game aspect of it, because both teams, if you've ever looked at their jersey colors, are green. Particularly the Green Bay Packers, green's kind of in the name. Eagles, they're not primarily green color, but they do have green jerseys and outfits. Neither team is allowed to actually wear green because the stadium that they're playing in, the home soccer team's rival wears green, and so it's basically forbidden, which we've been making jokes about this pretty much ever since it was announced. So go back and listen to all of those conversations. But for the actual game itself, I'll let you take it and start us out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit disappointing because I was excited to see both of these teams in action because both improved dramatically on offense, and the Eagles especially improved on defense. Eagles did get some bad news this week in James Bradbury being injured, and so that will hurt their secondary. Luckily, they have a lot of youth in their secondary from this year's draft that can hopefully fill those gaps. I'm excited to see the running battle between these two teams. We got Saquon Barkley just signed with the Eagles, who a lot of people are excited to see what can happen, and Josh Jacobs, the mountain of a man that's been running in Vegas for the Raiders for the last few years, flipped over and joined the Packers, and I think he is going to make a huge difference. That is a massive upgrade over Aaron Jones for the Packers, and Jordan Love has got to be happy about that addition.
I'm actually not sure if that is an upgrade over Aaron Jones. I look at Josh Jacobs the last year, like he's had, when in his rookie year he was great, in his second year he was bad, his third year he was great, and then last year he was bad again. I shouldn't say bad, he just wasn't that great. Aaron Jones, whenever he was out there, he was a great running back. He just needed to stay healthy. I think Josh Jacobs is going to be more consistently healthy, and he's going to be a little bit more, but I've never been super high on Josh Jacobs as a consistent back, so I'm not sure I would agree on that. I think Jordan Love is going to be happy that he's going to have a guy that's going to constantly be out there and be healthy, but I'm not sure if I would say that he's a better back than Aaron Jones when healthy.
See, I think he is, because he's now going into a system where he's going to have the consistency. And what we saw from him is when he had consistency, he would get better and better by week. The issue for that Raiders team is it was always, oh, here's a new quarterback. Oh, here's a new coach. Oh, here's a new quarterback again. Here's another new quarterback again. And it was always somebody different handing him the ball. It was always a different philosophy. It was always a different, mindset for the quarterback in front of him. He's now got Jordan Love, who we know the Packers. Jordan Love's going to be the quarterback there for the next decade. And so Josh Jacobs can go in there and be like, okay, I know this guy. I can get to know him. I can figure out his tendencies, he can figure out mine, and we can make this work. And I think that's what we're going to see. Much like I said about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, though, there will be growing pains. So it might not be great in week one here, especially being in a different country with them having to be, locked up in their hotel rooms before the game and all this drama that's going on. But as we progress through the season, I think we're going to see that Josh Jacobs from his rookie season start to reemerge, and people are going to be going, holy crap, this guy is a beast.
Yeah, and I think I might have come off a little bit more negatively against Josh Jacobs. I think he's a good back. I just don't think he's maybe like that true top 10 running back in the league. It's just like he's without a doubt going to be a lot better with the Packers than he was with the Raiders, having Matt LaFleur there, having a more consistent O-line, and all those things should make him a consistent back. I just was really high on Aaron Jones, which is weird coming from a Bears fan, having
That
to
is a
say
little weird
having to say nice things about that, but yeah,
but yeah, I can agree. Josh Jacobs right now, not a top 10 back. I think by the end of this season, a lot of people are going to be talking about him as a top 10 back.
Okay. Now, actually going over and taking a look at this actual game itself, Green Bay Packers taking on the Eagles. The weird thing about the Packers this offseason is I don't know if they really got all that much better, because they drafted a tackle to kind of help shore up their offensive line. Jordan Love is going into year 2 of playing, when realistically it's like year 5 for him in the NFL. But when you look at the Eagles, they without a doubt got drastically better in the biggest area they needed to get better, which was their secondary. Drafting, where did you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to say their coaching staff.
Well, they did that too. Like
yeah,
they got
because that was the issue last year.
Well, I think when it came to on-field product, I think it was without a doubt their secondary, and they needed to get drastically better. And Howie Roseman, we always talk about Howie Roseman being probably the best general manager in all of football, because when he sees an issue with the team, he attacks it and he gets quality players. And the guys that he brought in, Quanyai Mitchell from Toledo, and then he also got Cooper DeJean, who, he was a corner at Iowa, but he can play both corner and safety, so they have a ton of versatility with those two guys coming in. And when you talk about the Packers wide receiver room, it's not like they have superstars out there. They have good guys, but no one that you're going to look at and go, this guy's a superstar, that guy's a superstar. It's just they have a coach that is able to scheme them open. I think this game is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. That's who I'm choosing to win this game, because I think their defense is going to be really, really good this year. I think their defensive line, a year more experience, basically the Georgia Bulldogs defensive line right there, is just going to be terrifying. But that secondary is going to allow them to slow the passing game down. And then the Eagles on offense, Saquon Barkley playing behind that offensive line. We talked about when Christian McCaffrey went from the Panthers to the 49ers, how much of an uptick that was going to be for his career. I have that same type of feeling for Saquon Barkley. Granted, that Eagles line without Jason Kelce there is worse, but it can't be that much worse. Jalen Hurts, he actually has a play caller who's not going to just lose his mind and just not know what to actually call or play. And the receiver room is quite stout. We talked about that last week of how they traded for Jahan Dotson, so that's actually a really good room. So I just think the Eagles are probably one of the best constructed teams in the NFL right now, and everything just tells me that they are just going to be the team to kind of they're going to be really tricky to beat in this game, and I think the Packers are going to be a little bit overwhelmed with their lack of talent on the defensive side of the ball versus what the Eagles kind of have on all phases. Because, again, other than center, because you're replacing a first ballot Hall of Famer, what is the weakness of this Eagles team? And even then, the coaching staff, which was maybe the answer most people would have said, they upgraded that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Saquon Barkley, and I am really excited for this guy because coming out of college, he was touted as one of the most dynamic and exciting running backs we were going to see in a generation.
He was touted to
And
be Barry Sanders.
exactly, and he went to a Giants team that had shit for an O-line, that had shit everywhere else, and they basically said, "Here is the Giants organization. Carry this on your shoulders while you run down the field with the football." And dude got hurt over and over again because his workload was so high. He doesn't have to worry about that now. He
Well,
now is going into a system where he's likely going to be the feature guy when the game's on the line. It's like, oh, we need something big. Let's give it to Saquon because he's rested, he's feeling good, and all the secondaries backed off because we've been bombing it out to Smith and Brown all game. And so that he I'm excited for him. We did our
he's gonna
fantasy
have a
draft
good
last
one.
week, and I was really hoping more guys were gonna sleep on him so I could grab him like second or third round, but he went early, so I he's gonna do some great things this year.
I'm trying to remember who actually picked him up.
Yeah, I can't remember. Oh, I no, I do remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
who's that?
it was our Packers fan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
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 But that's okay. That's again why I grabbed Josh Jacobs, and I'm gonna see if I can
Just
flip
try
that
to get a
somehow.
little bit of a flippy flip.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll even sweeten the pot for him. We'll see if I can get him. But that's discussions for other days. Back to the
exactly.
game. You said you're picking the Eagles, and I have to agree. I also am picking the Eagles to win this game. I don't think it's going to be as explosive as it would be if it was in Philadelphia or Green Bay. I think if either of these teams, like if it was in one of their stadiums, this would be a high-scoring, fun game to watch. I think this is going to be what we sort of see from the first week of the European games, where it's
It's a
low
little bit more
scoring.
sluggish.
Yeah,
Yeah. The only
yeah.
positive thing about this game is yes, they're still having to travel a ton of distance, but the
Mhm.
time is going to be relatively the same for both of them. I can't
Yeah.
remember where Sao Paulo is, but I'm pretty sure it's closer to like the Eastern time zone for a lot of these guys, so it might be an hour difference for the actual time that they're going to be playing because I know it's a 6:15 kickoff our time.
Yeah.
So but the spread in this game is the Philadelphia Eagles -3. So who do you have in the spread?
I do have the Packers covering this spread. Like I said, I think it's going to be a, fairly tight, not high scoring game. And so I think what we're going to see is likely a 1 or 2 point difference at the end of the game, decided probably by a field goal.
I actually have the Eagles on the spread. I think again it's going to be a very close game, but I think
Mhm.
the Eagles will walk away with 4 points. The 4 point spread for them in this one. It's one of those situations where I feel fairly comfortable with that. Again, not going to be the high totem explosive offensive game. Again, that travel is definitely going to do stuff, and the fact that a lot of these guys are just going to be locked up in their hotel rooms, they're not going to be as loose as they possibly would be for some of the other things, like going to London. They're walking around having a jolly good old time. So this is going to be an interesting game. So both of us choose the exact same thing for the Ravens versus Chiefs. Chiefs both in the money line and the spread, and then both of us choose the Eagles on the money line, and then you choose the Packers on the spread while I choose the Philadelphia Eagles. So that is where that is. And taking a look at some of the other bets that we had for this game, there was really only two that we have. And Sterling, I'll let you kind of take us away with this one.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't really. It's hard to do player prop bets in this first week because you don't know what's going to happen. And I looked through them still, and there was some obvious ones. Derrick Henry getting so many rushing yards. Who's going to be the anytime touchdown scorers, things like that. But ultimately, I just went with the Chiefs money line on this because it's the one thing that I'm truly confident in. I think the Chiefs will win. And so that's, minus 155 odds on that. So you're not going to be making bank, but it's a fairly sure bet in my opinion.
Yeah, another bet that I was looking at. Again, you and I will likely make player bets the day of, because that's the type of people that we are. But we're trying to give you the smart bets to kind of go after if you're looking to try to make an educated one. But the other one that we had was the it was what's the official number there? I don't have the number for me for the total amount that we could have for 48.5 under, which both of us kind of looked at and we said the under is probably going to be a fairly decent bet in this game. We don't think it's going to be high scoring, so yeah, we're taking the under for 48.5 points in the Packers versus Eagles.
Yeah, I was going to make sure that you threw that in there. That was for the Eagles-Packers game. Yeah, the under, I think the app I was using had that at 49, but either way, 48.5, 49, minus 110 odds. Again, easy bet, easy money. We don't think it'll be high scoring. So that's sort of all we had this week for bets, And again, we always say, please bet responsibly. If you can't afford to be doing that, don't do it. Don't bet above what you're capable of handling. We simply do this for just a little bit of added fun to the game, and we try to keep it safe, try to keep it smart.
Yep, make sure that you are betting legally, betting smart. Again, for us, we are dollar bettors, maybe $2 and at most $5. Like we are not, like we simply do it for fun. We just simply give you our opinions on this, but make sure that you were doing it legally if you are of age and you were doing it smartly. And if you have a problem, seek help.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And even the $5 bets, I think all I did some future bets during the off season because I got some free money from, playing some side games where it gave you just bonus bets to use. And I was like, oh, hell, I'll throw 5 or 10 on, the Steelers winning the Super Bowl, or I built a 7-leg parlay on the division winners, things like that.
Yeah. So next thing that we always typically do is we talk about our top 5 and our bottom 5 power rankings. So at the start of the year, these are kind of interesting rankings. Last year, what we did is that we would give each of our own personal choices, but we've collaborated it to be a equal one. To start us out with our bottom 5, our 28th team is the Denver Broncos, 29th team is the Commanders, the 30th team is the New England Patriots, the 31st team is the Giants, and the 32nd team is the Carolina Panthers. And pretty much just speaking with all these teams, there's a lot of question marks surrounding all these squads, whether it's their quarterback, whether that's their coaching staff, whether it's just the team that's around them. All of these teams we feel have much bigger journeys to climb. It's not to say none of these teams will leave the top 5, because most certainly one or multiple of them will. But all of these teams we feel are kind of the 5 worst squads in the NFL.
Yeah, to start out the season, we look at it, and these are the 5 teams that we sort of look at and go, right now, we feel like these are going to be picks 1 through 5 in next year's draft, because that's just sort of where they're sitting. But we see it every year. A team will come out of nowhere, surprise us, and end up being a 6 or 7 win team instead of the 2 or 3 that we were anticipating.
I would just like to say, for the first time in 2 years, when we've been doing our power rankings, the Bears haven't started the season in the bottom 5, baby. Let's go. Let's go. Just had to throw that. But now talking about our top 5. At number 5, we have the Houston Texans. This is a team that really impressed us last year. We think they're going to be doing really, really good things this year. And all around, they just should be a team that we're constantly seeing in the top 5. They could fluctuate in and out throughout the year, just depending on certain games. They could win a game and still be dropped out just because another team does something pretty spectacular. At number 4, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Again, AFC championship game. It's hard to kind of leave kind of the championship game teams out of this, so you'll be surprised to hear that we have the Lions at 3, the 49ers at 2, and the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs at 1. But yeah, a lot of these teams, it wasn't really hard to make this rating, even though that we have 4 of the conference championship teams in there. It was kind of like, okay, they're still all really, really good, and they should still all be there anyways. I know in years past we might have had a conference championship team that makes it there, and we'll say to ourselves, they're not a top 5 team this year. This case was not that.
No, exactly. Sometimes that does happen. You know, a team makes that push, but then they have to blow the team up because they're in cap hell. You know, which, you know, it was looking like the 49ers were starting to have some of those issues into this offseason with the Brandon Ayuk drama. They're still going through it with Trent Williams right now. And next year, we fully expect them to be going through it yet again because they keep paying these players, which admittedly, the players deserve the money. They're playing very well. But they're just pushing the cap every season right now, and it's only a matter of time before it catches up to this 49ers team.
Yeah, sooner or later you're going to have to pay off the credit card, and it's going to be you're going to be put in a situation where you're the New Orleans Saints, where we're saying you're going to have to pay your credit card soon, and then go, no, we got this next year. It's like, well, you keep adding. It's like, no, we got this, and now we're looking at the New Orleans Saints going, you guys ready to pay your credit card? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And even then, they're kind of sitting back going, but we still put money on it. Like, God damn it. Stop. But yeah, so those are kind of some of the standard stuff that we typically do throughout the week. We'll see these sort of things every single week throughout the regular season. Now what we get back into kind of like what we like to call Rant Street once we get away from some of our picks. If you've been watching the offseason, it's pretty much just been this because we haven't had any predictions that we've been trying to make. So I know there was something that you noticed this week in the media that you kind of wanted to talk about. So take it away, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Rant Street, we like to ramble about our teams a little bit, and I know I was watching a lot of Good Morning Football this week, just trying to gear up for the season to start again, and I noticed Jamie Erdahl is getting a little bit tired of all of us having podcasts, you know, yet she's still out there listening to all of them. But she was going off this week about a Steelers podcast last week, 2 guys that do a Steelers podcast, and he's like, man, these guys opened up their show talking about the elephant in the room for Pittsburgh. And she's like, oh, okay, they're going to talk about the quarterback. And no, they were like, who is going to be the number 2 wide receiver? And she just went off, and it's like, was so upset that they were not talking about the Justin Fields, Russell Wilson debate. And I get it. That is an elephant in the room for that team. But the point of it being a Steelers podcast, you know, if you've been a Steelers fan for a lot of years, you've watched what this team does, and you know they don't often backtrack on their word unless something wows them. And that was just it. We knew going into training camp and preseason, unless Justin Fields came out there and was like, holy crap, everybody looks at this and goes, this kid might actually be a top 10 quarterback. At that point, then it's like, okay, maybe they will make that change. You know, Mike Tomlin was playing coy all preseason and go, oh, we don't know. It's a competition. But all of us Steelers fans knew when we saw Justin Fields out there that it was Russell Wilson's job. We knew it was going to be Russ because Justin Fields did not do anything with this offense that made anybody go, wow, this is going to be a team to be reckoned with on offense this year. And so I understand where those guys were coming from because ultimately the biggest hole on that team is the wide receiver room. We've got 2 good quarterbacks. You know, we knew it was going to be Russ. So I get where they're coming from going, who's going to be this number 2 for us? And it made me laugh a little bit seeing Jamie Erdahl, you know, who every day talks about football. You know, that's what she does every day. And she goes, oh, everybody has a podcast now. It's like, yeah, you know, we all jibber jabber. That's how we started this. We jibber jabber about football every day. Yep. And we were like, you know what? Let's turn the camera on. Why not? What's the harm in it? Who's it going to hurt? Apparently it's hurting Jamie Erdahl.
Yeah, and I know where she's coming from in this one because I have a similar reaction of going, you know, if like for instance, if this was FS1 talking about it, you know, first things first, saying like, oh, the biggest elephant in the room for the Steelers is the wide receiver room, I'd be like, guys, like, come on, it's the quarterback. But this was a Steelers focused podcast.
Yeah.
So for that, it's a podcast dedicated to the Steelers. And like what you're saying, I've been saying that I think Justin Fields the entire offseason should be the starting quarterback, but I've said multiple times, I know it's going to be Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
I still think it should have been Justin Fields. Regardless of that, I still knew that it was going to be Russell Wilson. And I didn't like it, but that was the case. But like I understand where she's coming from, where in her national standpoint of going, you guys realize that your number 2 wide receiver is not the biggest problem that you have in your room. And the biggest problem that you have on this team is you don't know who the hell your quarterback is going to be. And sure, Mike Tomlin announced that Russell Wilson is the starting quarterback, but everyone's kind of sitting back going like, Russell Wilson's the starting quarterback. Yay. Yep. And it's like I will step in and speak for Steelers fans as someone who isn't a Steelers fan, going, when Mike Tomlin announced Russell Wilson as the starting quarterback this week, no one was excited.
No, exactly. And I do understand as well. And like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not going at her. Like,
no. And like, I'm just taking it from, the media guy got to help defend some of the media and just kind of giving that extra perspective.
Yeah. And I'm, being the Steelers fan, I'm just defending these guys too, going, I think a part of it was probably they're sick of talking about, is it Russell Wilson? Is it Justin Fields? And they wanted to kick their podcast off with something different.
Yes.
Which, I don't fault them.
Totally.
That was what they were going for, and it just, I found it so funny because, we are big into this podcast, and the fact that she went so hard on everybody has a podcast now, but then ended the segment by talking about how she spends the weekend listening to podcasts.
Yeah. Yep. It's hilarious. It's without a doubt hilarious. And yeah, Good Morning Football does a phenomenal job. And
I love that show, man. I watch it every morning. Don't get me wrong. I love those guys. Kyle Brandt, Peter Schrager, Jamie Erdahl, like that. They are great. I enjoyed watching their segments this week on they were doing their fantasy drafts, wide receivers, running backs, and it
stealing all of our content. Stealing all of our content. Yeah.
Right. I mean, or in some cases, giving us content ideas.
Exactly.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Like I said at the start of this, I have some concerns for both of our teams. And seeing as we are talking about the Steelers, I feel like this is going to be an area that I want to start out with. And again, I've made this kind of public announcement address saying I have a lot of respect for the Steelers and the Steelers organization. I've always viewed them as the Chicago Bears of the AFC, because when you look at both of these two teams, they have been built off of running and hard-nosed defense and just having that philosophy. So I've always viewed the Steelers as basically the Chicago Bears of the AFC. If you look at their history, they are widely pretty much the exact same franchise, with the one difference of a coin toss allowed the Steelers to get Terry Bradshaw as opposed to him going to the Bears, and then you drafted Ben Roethlisberger when the Bears later in that draft selected Josh McCown. Or what was it? I forget exactly who it was, but I know the Bears drafted a quarterback later in that draft class that just happened to not be that great. And it's pretty much, it's two organizations that are separated by two franchise quarterbacks. Other than that, they're pretty much, I would say, the same team.
Yep.
And so
hard-nosed football, focus on the run game, tough defenses.
Yep. They are very, very similar. With that being said, and I know you and I chatted about this a little bit throughout the week, I'm extremely worried about this Steelers offense. And I have been saying this pretty much all offseason, that I have been worried about the Steelers offense. And I sent you a picture of what the Steelers did in their first two games for all of their offensive drives with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in at quarterback. They hadn't added the third game in just because it had been played. And so I kind of went through and did my own little research with this, and I looked at every single offensive drive that the two starting quarterbacks, air quotes, starting quarterbacks, were in, and it's incredibly worrying. I know we always talk about it's preseason, it doesn't really matter, this, that, and the other thing. I think this is one of those things where it should be a concern, in my opinion, because in week 1 versus the Texans, Russell Wilson did not play. So you had 3 drives with Justin Fields. First drive, punt. Second drive, 3 and out, punt. Third drive, punt.
Mhm.
That is, again, preseason week number 1. You know, what are we really going to talk about? You know, obviously this offensive schemes aren't going to be high level. Defensive schemes aren't going to be high level. For a guy like Justin Fields, however, going up against what was kind of like a half mixture of starting offense or defensive players with mixture of backups, I expected much more from him in that first offensive drive. Because we know what Justin Fields is as a starting quarterback. We know exactly what he is. That to me was extremely, extremely disappointing. And we talked about it that week where it was extremely disappointing. It's like, okay, whatever. Go over to week number 2 versus the Buffalo Bills. Russell Wilson finally getting some playing time during the preseason. Drive number 1, 3 and out, punt. Drive number 2, 3 and out, punt. Drive number 3, punt. Drive number 4, 3 and out, punt. Drive number 5, missed field goal. So, okay, so the offense started to move the ball a little bit, but they missed. Justin Fields then goes into the game. First drive, 3 and out, punt.
Yep.
Second drive, field goal. So, okay, got some points. Third drive, turnover on downs. Fourth drive, which was a 4 and out, turnover on downs. Again, you look at that and say, because we essentially had 5 Wilson drives, so you had 9 drives that you looked at there. You had 3 points and 2 turnovers on downs. That is, and then you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3 and outs. I'm including that 4 and out because, you know, if they would have punted it at that point, it would have just been a 3 and out. So they had 5 3 and out. So half of their drives ended in a 3 and out. And again, we're talking about both of these guys going up against half starters, half backups. Wilson, more realistically, going up against more of the Bills starters than just Fields was. But if Fields wants to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, going up against backups, sure, he has backups in with him. He needs to show that he can take that next step.
Yeah.
Going over to week number 3 versus the Lions. Drive number 1 for Russell Wilson. Touchdown. Okay, here we go. We got some movement going. That's the last drive for Russell Wilson's preseason. Drive number 1 for Justin Fields. Touchdown. Boom. There we go. Drive number 2 for Fields and the offense. 3 and out, punt. Drive number 3 for Fields and the offense. Punt. So not a 3 and out on that occasion. We talk about the 2 touchdowns on those drives. Both rushing touchdowns. And
short rushing touchdowns at that. They got it into within the 5-yard line and then ran it in from there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it pretty much in the 16 drives that they had on offense between these 2 starting quarterbacks, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 3 and outs. No turnovers, however, so that's a positive. No passing touchdowns. They managed to accumulate 17 total points. In terms of passing throughout those 3 games, combined they had 252, rushing 48, no passing touchdowns, no interceptions, no fumbles, but the biggest thing is the 7 sacks between the 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
This, to me, is extremely, extremely worrying because you have Russell Wilson, who has already kind of showed that he hasn't necessarily found that connection with a lot of the starters. Again, you know, he had 6 total drives in the preseason, so it's hard to get that sample size, but he's going up against half starters, half backups. You're maybe expecting a little bit more. Fields, you're definitely expecting a lot more with him going up against the backups. But for me, there's 2 things that really worry me. Is what we're seeing from Arthur Smith, from the play calling, and the sacks that these 2 quarterbacks are getting. The NFL put up a graphic of the most sacked quarterbacks over the last 2 seasons. Russell Wilson was number 1 with 100, and Justin Fields was number 2 with 99. So if you combine both of those guys over the last 2 years, that's 200 sacks. Okay, it's 199 sacks. And there is a very big difference from when you look at how long a quarterback is holding onto the ball. because we always talk about Patrick Mahomes holds on to the ball a long time, but he doesn't really get sacked versus what we see from Wilson and Justin Fields of where they're holding onto the ball too long and they just look confused. And so for me, the two biggest things is Arthur Smith has not been able to get his offense moving in the preseason. And again, you're not going to show your true offense, but you still should be showing enough to actually give me the hope that you're actually going to be able to do something as an offensive coordinator. We always talk about it can't be worse than Matt Canada. And I even said this to you earlier this week. I said, but it's not looking like it's going to be any better than Matt Canada at this point. And the sacks are not ideal at this point as well. And all of these things combining are really, really worrisome for me because we've talked time and time again about how good the Steelers defense is. The Steelers defense is phenomenal. I am not convinced that this offense is going to be any better. I don't know how it could possibly be worse than last year, but I'm genuinely concerned that this offense somehow might actually be worse than last year. I don't know how. I have just this nagging feeling that when we're watching the Steelers offense, it's somehow going to be worse.
That's fair. And I mean, going through especially those first two preseason games, it's definitely fair to think that. What we saw in that Lions game in the third preseason, though, was those first two drives, it was a little bit more of Arthur Smith showing his hand on what the offense is going to look like. And as you pointed out, that was a touchdown.
Yes.
And so after that, Justin Fields was playing with the third stringers. Because at that point, like even after that Russell Wilson touchdown, it was like, okay, George Pickens is out too. That was the moment where
everyone knew that Russell Wilson was the
finalized
starter.
His decision that Russell Wilson was the starter. You
Yeah.
know, which again, we all sort of felt like it was anyway, but at that moment it was okay, this is the offense that he wants to run. And that was it. But at that point it was third stringers in with Justin Fields. So as you pointed out though, he needs to do more in order to take that job away from the guy ahead of him. You know? And yeah, I'm concerned about this offense as well. But I don't think it's going to be as bad as last year. You know, I think we saw some flashes there. Those sacks are very concerning. I know Broderick Jones is dealing with an elbow injury in that left tackle position. He's been wearing a brace. That is a big concern to me. I almost wonder if maybe they should step aside and go with Dan Moore Jr. because he's familiar with that position and let Broderick Jones heal up. We did also have Nate Herbig go down with a season-ending pectoral tear, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, Zach Frazier is thrust into a starting role as a rookie. You know, rookie third rounder. That's a tough one. And you look at what he was able to do in that third week as well. He was good. He had one miscommunication with Justin Fields where he snapped the ball too soon when Justin wasn't ready for it. Ended up being, luckily, only a sack. You know, that was one of those sacks where it was,
It wasn't really Justin Fields' fault type situation.
It wasn't. But then you look at some of the other sacks that did occur, and they really were Justin Fields' fault. And it was the Justin Fields that we saw in Chicago, where instead of rolling out and away from the pressure, he was doing exactly what he did last year, exactly what we saw Kenny Pickett doing last year, where they roll into the pressure and get sacked immediately, which is a decision-making thing that you can't really put that on the offensive coordinator. You put that more on the quarterback and the quarterback's coach because they should be coaching that out of the guy and teaching him how to properly manage that pressure. And, you know, as a quarterback, once you reach the NFL, you should be able to manage that pressure also. And it was decisions like that ultimately that cost Justin Fields any opportunity at the starting position in week one. You know, Russell Wilson, you know, also was facing some of those sacks, but it wasn't. It was, as you said, it was him holding on to the ball too long, trying to make something happen when there was nothing there. You know, those are the situations where I think he's going to need to accept the fact that he's 35 now, not 25. You're running outside the pocket. There's nothing there. Just throw the ball away. throw it out of bounds, go to the next down, see what we've got, rather than taking a hit at your old age and potentially getting hurt as a result. So yeah, there are definitely some concerns there. I'm worried about this team this season and going forward on offense because we don't know what we've got. I still like to be the optimist
Totally.
and feel like what we saw at the start of that Lions game is more of what we might be able to see out of this Steelers offense. Because the Steelers were controlling that game until it was third stringers. Even with Justin Fields with the punt, and everything, it was still a 14-0 game. It wasn't until Justin Fields came out and it was the third string defense out there. That was when the Lions started to mount the
Yeah,
comeback.
that
And
they
everything.
showed the depth at the position where they have more depth.
Exactly. And so that was something that was definitely promising that they were able to sort of hang with the Lions, even if the Lions didn't necessarily have their starters in there right away.
Yeah. And
So it'll be interesting to see when we get to week 1 what the product is out there when it's all number ones all the time against all number ones all the time.
yeah.
That's the toughest thing, is making that translation from preseason to regular season, because some teams have a dramatic drop off in depth, and some teams are very good at having next man up. That ultimately is my biggest concern with the Steelers team, is we've always been very good with next man up, and our depth over the last 3 or 4 years, due to injuries and players leaving, it's fallen off. And so we don't have as much of that next man up on offense as we used to have.
Yeah.
And so that's where the concern is going to come in, is, what if Troy Fatanu goes down to an injury? What if Zach Frazier gets in? We saw it this week. Isaac Suomalo took an injury during practice where we're like, oh shit, we might not have our left guard to start the season. So there are some concerns there with the depth, especially on the O-line, that is very concerning.
Mm-hmm. And again, the last thing that I will say about this is, with all the stuff, and again, I'm saying like, oh, the punt, 3 and outs, this, that, and the other thing.
Mhm.
I always just sit back and go, the sacks that the quarterbacks are taking, and Arthur Smith, because again, when we looked at it last year, there was 3 guys that you and I bitched about constantly when it came to offensive play callers. It was Matt Canada, Luke Getsy, and it was Arthur Smith. And I know you're the optimist. You're always trying to find the positive and trying to look at this and go, okay, we just need Arthur Smith of Tennessee. And I go, that would be great, but I don't think Arthur Smith has the level of players that he had when he was the OC of Tennessee. He doesn't have a prime Derrick Henry. He doesn't have a rejuvenated Ryan Tannehill. He doesn't have the receiving weapons. Like he doesn't have AJ Brown there. In some of these situations. And so again, I just kind of sit back and I go, those 3 years of extremely bad habits at play caller that we saw at Atlanta, and what we're seeing from this preseason so far, because again, the 3 and outs, those to me are the biggest concerns. If the Steelers were moving the ball and they were having like 6-7 play drives and they were showing something and it was like, oh, like we tried to get this pass but it didn't quite connect, and it's just, but the 3 and outs, man, those are the things that are really concerning me with Arthur Smith, just because if it was like 1 or 2 3 and outs, different story to me. But the fact that it just kept happening over and over again, I just go, man, this is preseason. Like this is like, yeah, sure, we're not expecting to see like magical stuff, but the fact that almost half of your drives were 3 and outs, and more than it was almost basically every drive was a punt. I'm just going, dude, like that's not it. And if you're going to have quarterbacks that have been sacked 7 times over the 16 drives that they're in there, so it's basically every other drive the offense is giving up a sack, and we know how devastating sacks are for a quarterback and an offense to take. It's just like, man, all of this stuff has just been starting to spiral for me and go, like, I'm throwing up the alarm bells. It's concerning for me.
Uh, and I agree. It is concerning. Like I said, I want to see what product they're going to put out in week one, because another, concerning factor for that preseason run is, well, it's the question of, was this the plan going forward, or is it something that they just sort of held in reserve because they didn't want to utilize it in the preseason because they know what they have at that? Is across those preseason games, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren combined only had 12 carries.
Yeah.
It was primarily Cordarrelle Patterson that was doing the running game in the preseason. I have to think and hope that the point of that is going, well, we know what this duo can do. We saw what it was last year. The concern here is who's going to be the quarterback, who are they throwing the ball to? So we're going to primarily run a passing offense through preseason to work these bugs out. And so that is my hope. And that's the thing. If other teams going into that, other coaches are going into that going, okay, well, I mean, Najee's not out there, Jalen's not out there. We know they're going to pass.
Yeah.
So we're just going to play a pass-heavy defense, and that results in a lot of 3-and-outs because of that. As you pointed out, no turnovers, which is promising. No interceptions thrown throughout that whole time. That is a good thing.
Without a doubt.
That means they're making the smart decisions, even if that results in them taking a sack instead.
Yeah.
I would rather a sack and a 3-and-out than an interception, especially considering our punter has improved vastly from the last few seasons. Presley Harvin
He's had
is
a
gone.
lot of practice.
Well, but I mean, Harvin is gone as well,
Yeah.
and Cameron Johnston has been one of the best punters in the league over the last few seasons. And so we've improved vastly there, which is good for our defense.
Yes.
That means there's going to be a lot more situations where that other team's going to be backed up inside their 15.
That's why the Bears drafted Torrey Taylor.
Well, and if you remember last season, a lot of the times that Steelers defense was starting the drive on, almost in their own end, because it was the
punt
other
was
team was
phenomenal.
getting the ball on the 35, the 40, the 45.
Yeah.
And so it was already almost midfield. So that's going to make a big difference. But ultimately it's that running game. Was this something that was held out because we know Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are a really good duo, and we don't need to see what they can do in preseason? We don't need to risk one of them getting a lower body injury, which Jalen Warren still did twist an ankle at one point during practice.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. It's basically, yeah.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate there, going, yes, there are a lot of concerns with that passing game. But as we talked about, the history of these teams is pound the ball, running it, and play defense. And if that's what this team's going to do, then those couple of drives where we saw the big flashes of, Russell Wilson standing in there in the pocket and hitting George Pickens right in the hands, if the running game is good, those opportunities are going to come, which is really good for this team. We could see it go from oh shit, what's this offense going to do, to, okay, this is, a top 15 offense with a number 1 defense. This is a playoff team. As opposed to, geez, this could be rivaling Daniel Jones on offense. That's where it becomes a concern. If that's what this offense ends up looking like, then we're in big trouble. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to pull the fire alarm yet until I see until I see what Arthur Smith is truly going to do. If we go out there and it's play action to Najee Harris and then check down to Cordarrelle Patterson, I'm going to be, scratching out Canada on that Fire Matt Canada and putting in Smith, because that's going to be a concern if he starts doing his decoy offense shit. But I think Mike Tomlin will shut that down pretty quick. I hope.
We thought that he was going to shut a lot of that stuff down with Canada, though, as well.
I think that was more the Rooney family that was forcing him to stick that out. I think that was them going, you made your bed, you're going to lie in it. They were like, and he still was pulling out winning seasons.
Yeah.
And
I
so
will say this about the Steelers, and this will be my
Mhm.
last kind of remark on this. And sorry
That's fine.
sorry for cutting you off there, but
All good.
the last thing that I will say about the Steelers team is, if Mike Tomlin has another season of like 9-8, or just makes it to the playoffs as a wild card team but then immediately gets bounced, it might just be time to move on. And this is coming from someone who has a ton of respect for Mike Tomlin, thinks he's a first ballot Hall of Fame head coach. He's been one of the best coaches in the league. It's just simply time for a change. Because, again, we talk about this. We know my philosophy on the defensive-minded head coaches. And going, he has, the biggest knock on Mike Tomlin, what we've talked about him for years and years and years, is his staff that he's able to bring in. That has been his biggest knock on him. Granted, if you're still a great head coach, you'll find ways to do stuff, and he has, and that team has always been very, very good. This is kind of one of those points where we've talked about the last 7 seasons of, okay, either you miss the playoffs or you make it to the first round and get bounced immediately. Especially in years of where they have looked really, really good. That season where they went 12-0 to start the year and then finished off poorly and lost to Cleveland. And I just look at this and I go, if it's 9-8 or below, or if it's you make it to the wild card game and you get bounced again, I go, it's 8 seasons, man. It's we're not saying we're firing you because we think you're a bad head coach. We're moving on because it's one of those situations where we say we just need a different outlook and we just need a different voice.
Yeah. All I'll say is, I look at that and I go, they just extended him 3 years. They gave Arthur Smith a 3-year. I think their plan, it's a 3-year plan. So even if they only go 9-8, losing the wild card, I don't think they'll be firing Mike Tomlin. I agree that maybe that's the move they should make. I think the only way that comes to be is if they've already talked to, say, Ben Johnson and he's like, yeah, I want to be the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If someone like that is available and willing to come, then I see them making that move. But they're not going to do they're not going to fire Mike Tomlin and then go, okay, well, let's see what's out there and hope we get somebody better because you don't know who's going.
I will say, that's a move that the Steelers make, knowing that they have a good chance at another good offensive coach like a Ben Johnson or a Bobby Slowick, those types of guys.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where I sit back and I go, and again, we want to see the Bears versus Steelers in the Super Bowl. Right now, the Bears have a better path to a Super Bowl than the Steelers do, and they have the better situation to have continuous success moving forward. And
100%.
It's a very weird thing for me to say that, talking about the Bears versus the Steelers, because the Steelers have been just the constant success for that type of situation. It just kind of feels like if we have Mike Tomlin there, even if they say this is a 3-year plan, it just feels like it's just going to be the same thing for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And at that point, if I'm the Rooney family and I go, if it's just going to be the same thing, that means that would be 11 years, or it would be 10 total years of just kind of being this, either we miss the playoffs just barely, or we make it to the playoffs and we get bounced in the first round. And I just go back and I go, you gave him that 3-year extension. That's great. That's awesome. You might have to make that hard decision, pull the Band-Aid off and go, listen, Mike, we don't want to do this. We love you. You will always be a Steeler. We just got to make a change.
And I 100% believe that conversation was had with him before
the contract
that extension was given. Because that was just it. Like, Matt Canada was brought in under Mike Tomlin's decision, and it was a bad decision. And I think the Rooney family looked at that when they went, okay, you do not get to choose the coaching staff anymore. We're going to bring somebody in. We're going to make these decisions now. We're going to give you the 3-year extension alongside who we bring in. We need change. So you need to show us over the next 3 years that it's not just going to be the same thing. That it's been from Mike Tomlin for the last 7 years. So yeah, I agree that conversation was had. And I think they probably said to him, they were like, if it's the same thing next year, we are going to be reaching out to some of these other OCs out there that are doing unique, great things, like Ben Johnson, like Bobby Slowick. And if we feel like we can get one of them, we are going to be parting ways with you. I feel like that conversation was had for sure. But at the same time, they were like, but if you are able to change this, if you are able to turn things around with what we're giving you, then by all means, you will stay a Steeler and you will stay here because that is the Steeler way. They will commit to a guy if they can show results.
Yes.
And that's what it is. It's results. Because as you said, Mike Tomlin is a first ballot Hall of Famer, especially if he goes out and has another winning season. Like there's nobody that can doubt he should be in the Hall of Fame.
If he retired today, there shouldn't be a doubt that he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
There shouldn't be, and that's just it. Like, but we need to break this streak of losing in the first round of the playoffs, because we're very rapidly becoming the new generation of the Dallas Cowboys. You know, I'm aware of that. You know, I see that. It's not going to change my fandom. I'm not going to jump ship. I know a lot of people would though. You know, like we've seen it. Like, look at all the Patriots fans that became Bucks fans that became Chiefs fans.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of that around the NFL. I've been with this team for 20 plus years. I'm going to stay here. I'm always going to find the positives in the bad decisions that are made. Can't pick it. And I'm going to find what I can to support this team because
you should.
It drives me nuts. We see it with your team, we see it with my team, we see it with others where there's these fans and all they do is hate on their team. And you look at them and go, why are you watching? Like what are you doing? You claim to be a fan, but you've never said anything positive about this team. I think you're just a fan of being a troll at that point. And I take issue with that.
Yep.
You know,
I know some
don't...
people might say that I've been kind of in that mode for the last few years, but no, I've been saying I want them to be bad because then they can allow themselves to get success.
Well, exactly. You know, and as you mentioned, you know, the Bears are on this upward trajectory, and like I would argue, if the Steelers had been bad enough at any point to have the first overall pick, which, to be fair, your Bears were not bad enough to have the first overall pick. They just had a GM that was able to make a trade that got them that.
Yep.
You know, and so that's just it. If the Steelers were able...
A 1 in a billion trade, that was.
Exactly. If the Steelers were able to do that and get a number 1 pick while still being, you know, only the 9th or 10th worst team, then I would argue the Steelers would be in a position that 100%. They were on a trajectory.
100%.
We haven't got there yet. But it's not to say that couldn't happen, because if things keep going this way, as you mentioned, and they opt to go, okay, Mike Tomlin, I'm sorry, but Ben Johnson said he wants to be here. We're going to bring him in. We have to make changes. At that point, they go, where can we move TJ Watt that we think could net us a couple of extra first round picks where we could maybe get
ourselves... Just call the Panthers.
Yeah, but that's sort of my point, is where will it be that we could potentially end up in a position where
to get that
not necessarily this year, because the quarterback situation for drafting isn't great this year, but the year following it's looking pretty decent, and the year after that is looking pretty decent as well.
Yep, 2025 and 2026 are looking like very good quarterback classes,
right?
And so there is that.
That's what I think we could see happen, is if it does not go well this year and they decide to bring in that offensive-minded coach, move on from Mike Tomlin, I could see them trading away guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, going, look, we're going to start fresh. We know we can build a defense. This team has shown time and time again that we can build a defense through the back half of the draft. I mean, look at Nick Herbig. He is just lighting it up as the third string on this edge rushing
and he was
team,
what, like a fifth round
I'll talk about him a little bit later, but this is something that it may end up happening. It may have to happen, and we've seen the Steelers do it. You know, the Steelers had a great dynasty in the 70s, and then it was rough in the 80s. It was mediocre in the 90s. It started that way out in the 2000s, and then we were able to draft that generational quarterback again. And that's what it is we're in that window now. Not everybody can be the Green Bay fucking Packers, as you would put it, and go from Hall of Famer to Hall of Famer to
don't say
question mark Hall of Famer.
Don't say it.
We
But
don't
yes,
know.
yeah,
I mean, he's one of the highest paid, so
yeah.
in theory, he should turn out to be very good. We both probably hope he won't, but
Yeah,
that's my point. Is not every team has that luxury to go back to back to back, or even back to back. Period.
most
Like
teams
it
don't go
was
back to back.
right. It was 20 years between our TB12 and Ben Roethlisberger.
Hmm.
If we can keep it to 10 years between Ben Roethlisberger and the next one, I call that an improvement over the last downfall. So
Totally.
it's every team goes through this. It's rough right now. Like I said, I'm trying to find the positives. We
Totally.
didn't see
And you
Najee
should.
Harris. We didn't see Jalen Warren a whole lot in preseason. So I hope that's because we're going to see both of them a lot in the regular season. Because I look at this team, and that's exactly what I would be running. I would be running freaking I formation, power I offense all season long. I'd be handing it off to those two guys. I would be throwing it over to the middle to Pat Fryermuth, and then I would be going in deep to George Pickens when he's one-on-one.
Yeah. But the question is, can Arthur Smith do that? But
Exactly.
yep, again, we've had a lot of these discussions, but this was just kind of my latest thing.
Hey,
Want
that's
to
the
bitch?
fun of it, and we'll have more.
Yes, we will. Now I want to bitch about the Bears for a second here. And this was something that I've been talked about how I was worried about this, and it's mostly revolving around the offensive line. I think the offensive line, the five base guys who the Bears have, Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Coleman Shelton, Nate Davis, and then Darnell Wright. I like that offensive line. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a top 15 offensive line. I'm not going to say it's the worst offensive line in football. I like it. I think that offensive line is good enough for a quarterback to succeed in if they are a great quarterback. Again, we saw Patrick Mahomes make it to a Super Bowl with an offensive line that was essentially Swiss cheese. It was closer to, just a revolving door of just, yes, please go through, sir. Oh, you're hitting our quarterback? Shucks. If you have a great quarterback, you can have subpar offensive lines. It helps to have really good offensive lines, don't get me wrong, but not every team can be the Philadelphia Eagles or the Detroit Lions. With that being said, Ryan Pace, the Bears general manager, this week on cut day, he was asked about the offensive line. He goes, I really like this room. I really like the depth of this room. And I'm sitting back going like, yeah, I think this is the best depth that we've had from an offensive line room in a long, long time. I don't want to see a single piece of that depth though, because it kind of terrifies me. And we've already had some injuries on the offensive line, and it kind of came to a point on Wednesday where there were so many injuries on the goddamn offensive line that for the second string offense, they had to use defensive linemen on the practice squad as offensive linemen. I'm sitting back going like, I know this offseason was getting Caleb and getting Rome and adding those, but I just sit back and I go, man, Poles, you were an offensive lineman. You were the offensive lineman whisperer for the Chiefs. You know who pounded the table for Creed Humphrey for the Chiefs? Poles. That was the expectation, was him coming in and going like, oh, he's going to revolutionize this offensive line. And I'm sitting back going like, how is it still this bad? Like, I'm worried for Caleb. Like, I'm not worried that Caleb's going to get hurt. His pocket awareness is going to be good enough to get him out of a lot of these bad situations. And plus, the offensive line that he had to deal with at USC has already sped his clock up to the point where in the NFL, his clock is already where it should be, and it's probably only going to get faster. But I'm just sitting back going like, man, how the hell do we have our second string offense having defensive linemen who are on the practice squad going there because we have so many injuries here at the moment? I'm just sitting back going like, this is terrifying. This should not be what we have right now. I should not be looking at our second offensive line and going, that guy is a D tackle and he's playing center.
Mm-hmm. No, that is very concerning for sure. And to Ryan Pohl's credit, I think his original plan was, I'm going to beef up this O-line. And then that first overall pick fell into his lap, and he went, okay, we need to shift. So, I mean, going into next year's draft, I 100% think that the focal point will be O lineman in that draft. First round pick will be an O lineman. It has to be. You can't do anything but that next year. And that may be the case for the next 2 seasons for the Bears.
The only
Because,
case that I could make it is if it's a really top end edge rusher.
but even then, like top end and edge rusher or top end
Yeah, like
protection,
it.
your number one.
I know what you're saying. Like it's a really hard decision to make.
It is. It'll be a
But
very hard decision to make, but it'll be one that I think Ryan Post will have to go and look at it and go, well, we've still got Montez Sweat.
yeah.
So, I mean,
And
we
this is a
really,
decision that
really,
we've already seen him make, where it could have
it
been
is.
like you could have had Jalen Carter, or you could have drafted Darnell Wright, and he chose Darnell Wright. Now, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, I'm a big fan of Darnell Wright. He was the best tackle drafted in last year's class.
Mhm.
I think if he stays healthy for the entire year, I think Pro Bowl is 100% on the table for him. And it's just one of those things where it's just like the injuries are kind of scaring me at the moment, where it's like I I have never heard of another team for their second string offensive line having to use defensive linemen that are on the practice squad for the second string offensive line because the
Yeah.
injuries have already piled up that much. I'm just sitting back going like, how come we don't have more offensive linemen on the practice squad then?
Well, and that's just it. It's that depth there, and it's tough because you don't want to spend a ton of roster spots on offensive linemen. You'd rather have the O lineman you've got be a little more versatile and be able to hold up to that, that bump and grind that happens in the trenches. Like it's rough down there. So
Yeah.
if maybe that's what it is. It's perhaps there's just a few too many guys in that depth room that are made of glass instead of stone. And that is where the problem comes in. Because I feel your pain. I'm going through the same thing with that Steelers O line, as I mentioned. So it's not quite that bad, but it's not great. And that I feel like that's the downfall of a lot of teams that are verging on greatness is the O line starts to collapse.
Yep.
Hopefully what happens for your Bears is Caleb Williams gives you guys more of the Patrick Mahomes effect as opposed to the Justin Fields effect, where the referees begin protecting your quarterback so that your O-line can hold and get away with it more.
Yeah.
Because that's what we see with the Chiefs ultimately is the reason Patrick Mahomes is so protected is because that O-line basically tackles the guys rushing them and don't get a flag thrown for them.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to hope is that's what happens with this Bears instead of, you get flagged so much that the O-line goes, okay, well, I can't hold him, so good luck, Justin Fields, which was what was happening to Fields the last couple seasons. That's why he was the second most sacked quarterback in the league.
Yeah. One of the things that I also remember seeing this week is someone talked about the average time of holding on to the ball between Caleb Williams and Justin Fields just this offseason or throughout the preseason games. And like Caleb Williams had something like 3.4 seconds of like holding on to the ball, and Justin Fields was like 3.6. And they looked at it and it's like, okay, here are the numbers from Caleb Williams and here are the numbers from Fields. Caleb had 1 sack versus Fields 4 sacks, and like and it was like these two numbers tell very different stories of how long you hold on to the ball and what they're doing when they're holding on to the ball. And so that's what gives me hope with Caleb, and kind of the thing that I said a little bit earlier of where he has that ability of where his pocket awareness is allowing him to hold on to the ball because he's moving within and then he's able to get out, as opposed to Fields of just going, this does not compute and I'm confused.
Yeah, that right there is exactly it. Caleb is much better at his progression and decision making. Like we saw several times where he checked it down to his running back or tight end confidently, and accurately, which was good to see. That will help protect him for sure. He might still get a couple of late hits here and there, but it's not going to be a sack, and he'll be all right. That's the issue with Justin Fields is, he goes through 1, 2, and by then it's already at that 3.6 seconds, so he doesn't have time to get to that check down even. And that is the issue with him. He, and I talked about it earlier with the bad decision making on the rollout. At least Russell Wilson rolls out the right way and away from the pressure most of the time, so he's able to hold the ball for 4 or 5 seconds
Yes.
and still get it away.
Yep.
You know, Caleb Williams, he's going to be all right. The only issue is if you guys get to the point where you're using those D linemen in a live game to be your offensive line, then oh boy, that is not good. At that point,
put Tyson Bagent in it. Don't put Caleb out there.
At that point, see if you can trade Keenan Allen away for an O lineman somewhere. You know, see if you can trade one of your pieces at another spot that is really depth heavy, so that you can get some more depth there at the O line. Because that is a scary prospect for sure. Because you guys have been battling with some. Luckily, from what I've seen, they're not serious injuries, so they're not going to carry over.
There's a lot of minor
into week
injuries that have just been there, so that's
exactly.
been the nice thing. But like just reading that report this week, you just kind of go like the anus clenches up a little bit. You go, oh
no. No, I feel that. That's how I was feeling watching that Steelers offense. So I get that anus clenching for sure. It's the hope is when we get into week 1 that they just power through those little dings and those little bumps, because that's what it is. Is it something that can become more serious or not? You know, is it like Broderick Jones where it's, should we be holding him out because he's got a freaking brace on that left elbow and he's letting guys get by him, and he shouldn't be. He should be a top level tackle.
Yeah.
So maybe at this point, put Dan Moore in, let him heal, and then get him back out there.
Yeah.
You know, you guys aren't feeling that. It's more you guys are, well, you know what, he's banged up a little bit. Let's just sit him so he doesn't turn into a chronic injury that he's dealing with weekly.
Yes.
But yeah, that would be understandable. That, and I would say for you, that's a good problem to have. If that is the biggest red flag you have for this Bears team right now, is that the O-line is a little bit banged up, but none have serious injuries during practice week, that might be a good thing.
Yeah.
If that doesn't translate into week 1 and you get through week 1 and you look at your injury report and nobody's on it after, you can breathe that sigh of relief for sure.
Yeah,
but I know you're going to be going through that first game.
Like the second that Tuesday comes and I can see the first full injury report that comes out by the teams, I'm going to be glued to that, basically just refreshing Twitter going, show me. But yeah, one of the other conversations that we were planning to have this week, we have 2 more. We're talking about expectations for some of our teams. So we kind of went through each of our own. We have an expectation of a player that we want to see improve on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, a player that we think is going to have a good jump this year from both the offense and defensive side of the ball, and just a rookie that we are really, really excited to watch. So I think for us, we should start on the player that we need to see improve on the offensive side of the ball. And since we're talking about the Chicago Bears and their O-line, I have 3 O-linemen that I have kind of penciled into this spot, but I'm ultimately going to go with Nate Davis, the right guard for the Chicago Bears. When the Bears signed him last offseason, I was extremely excited. He's coming over from the Titans. I went, is he the best right guard in the NFL? No, but he can without a doubt be a top 10. Last offseason had a lot of rocky and shaky starts to his tenure with the Bears. Some stuff came out about, family issues and personal life that was like, okay, we can give him some, benefit of the doubt. And then he played fairly well last year. He was a pretty consistent guard. This offseason, it's basically just been like, does Nate Davis actually care that he's playing football? Because he hasn't done dick. Like, it's just no one really seems to know what he's kind of doing. And we're paying him $10 million a season to be our starting right guard, to anchor this up in front of our first overall pick quarterback. Does he actually care that he's supposed to be practicing? And it's been like, oh, well, he has soft tissue damage. Okay. What's his demeanor like? His demeanor? Yeah, what's his demeanor like? It's a demeanor. It's like, that's not good. Like, yeah. I want to see him, when he's out there on the field, if he's going to have this type of attitude during the off season, I need to see you go out there and kick ass from the guard spot. I need you to be an absolute mauler, and I can't just see this average guard play from him if these are the types of situations that he's going to be putting the team through during the offseason. Like, at one point, I'm sitting back going, like, why is he still on the team at this point? Just cut him. Like, if this is going to be the headache that he's going to deal with, we brought in guys for this reason. And so for me, I really want to see him improve.
Yeah, no, that is fair. And, as you mentioned, the O-line is the biggest concern for you there. So, yeah, that checks out. I mean, for me, going over the Pittsburgh Steelers, the big concern is wide receiver. And I need to see improvement from Calvin Austin III. He's entering his third year in the league, second year playing. He did miss his rookie season due to an injury, but he didn't do much in the preseason here. I talked about maybe they were doing a little bit too much pass heavy, and that might be why, but we lack a number 2 right now.
Yes.
And he has the opportunity to show he can be that. He is a dynamic wide receiver. He is fast. He is really good at running his routes. He needs to step up now. I need to see that improvement from him in his third year if he wants to remain a Steeler going forward. We didn't see much out of him last year, be that Matt Canada's offense or because Deontay Johnson and George Pickens were ahead of him. I'm hoping Arthur Smith can find a way to get him involved in this offense because he's so dynamic and fast, and I want to see those flashes that we saw from him in college. Like, I want to be able to see that Calvin Austin III that wowed us and why he was drafted. And really, that is what I need to see.
He was so fun to watch at Memphis.
Right? We need to see that improvement from Calvin Austin this year. And it doesn't just fall to him, that falls to Arthur Smith. You need to scheme him well. If George Pickens is double covered and Pat Freiermuth has the safety on him, that means Calvin Austin likely is going up against a nickel or a second tier cornerback at that point. And you need to make use of that. And so I'm hoping we see that. I know Van Jefferson currently is penciled in to be the wide receiver too, which fine. I think Calvin Austin can do special things if given the opportunity, and I need to see that from him.
Yeah, that's very, very fair. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, the Bears, this was another guy that they signed last offseason to a bigger deal. I was less excited about this guy, Demarcus Walker. He kind of plays that edge rusher, D tackle role. He can kind of fill in both of those situations. Coming over, funny enough, from Tennessee yet again. He had 7 sacks on his last year with Tennessee, was coming in to kind of be that number 1 edge rusher for the time being until they got Montez Sweat. Even once they got Montez Sweat in there, it's not like he had a great amount of production. For me, I go the money that the Bears are paying you from you coming in, and you've shown that you can be a 7 sack guy in the NFL. You have to go out there and really take that next step and show that you can get back to being that more consistent. I'm not asking for double digit sacks. I'm not asking for crazy numbers. I'm just asking 7 sacks. Show us that you can remain at that peak, because if you can do that and have Montez Sweat thinking what we can have from him, I think he's going to be closer to that 12.5 sack range. You've said you can fully expect him to have like a 15 sack season. We both view Montez Sweat as that level of an edge rusher. But if you're Demarcus Walker, you know that you're not going to be getting double teams. And you have this 5th round rookie Austin Booker who's coming in, and then Darrell Taylor, who the Bears just traded for. So you're being paid a ton of money. I need to see you step your game up.
Yeah, 100%. And that's just it. You mentioned next year possibly, is it going to be an O lineman or is it going to be an edge rusher? If Demarcus Walker can show he can be that number 2 guy, that makes Ryan Poles' job so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Moving over to the Steelers. I mean, for me, it's the D-line. And I need to see improvement this year out of another third-year player. Was also taken in that same draft as Calvin Austin, and that's Demarvin Leal. He was brought in initially to sort of fill that role of Cam Hayward when he retires, and he just didn't have it. And now, we drafted Keanu Benton last year, who has shown that he will be able to fill that role. The thing is, there's still 2 spots on that D-line open and available going forward. Leal needs to make a big step up this season and show that he can fill that gap, because that's just it. Cam Hayward plays all along that D-line in front of TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. He's every position on that D-line he can play. If we've got Keanu Benton playing that middle D tackle spot, okay, Leal, you need to show you can play that right end, left end, whatever it ends up being. You need to be able to fill that role, and you need to start doing something. Hayward got hurt last year, and still we didn't see Leal providing very much on defense. His stats were fairly lackluster, to the point where I didn't even bother writing them out because they were that low.
He was a third round pick a few years ago, correct?
He was. Yeah. He was, but they were very high on him for that reason. As I said, the Steelers are very good.
Third round pick, you still have to have high expectations for sure.
Between the 3rd and 5th round for defense. Yeah. And so I'm hopeful. He was given some reps this preseason with the edge rushers. So he was learning a bit more from TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith.
Trying to get some of those extra moves.
Right? My hope is that he was able to pick up on some of that and learn a little bit more on how to make that first move. Because that's what's been holding him back, is that first move on the line, and he gets stunted by the O-line, and then he just cannot catch up and doesn't make that play. If he can get better at making that first move and shedding that block and get into the backfield more often, that's going to help him improve his stats, improve his ability on this D-line, and open more opportunities for himself, as well as Benton, Highsmith, Watt, Herbig, all of these guys. It's going to just create more windows of opportunity for everyone. But he, for me, really needs to be that guy that makes that big step. Like I said, it's his 3rd season here. If he doesn't get it done soon, he's soon going to be shown the door, I feel, and he will not be with this team for much longer.
Yeah, now moving over to our offensive players that we are expecting to have better years this year. And so for the Chicago Bears, funny enough, it was one of the guys that I talked about a little bit earlier, and that is Darnell Wright. Again, I thought he was the best tackle that we saw play last year that was drafted. I think he has the opportunity to really add extra to what he's capable of doing. I think he can be a Pro Bowl level offensive tackle in the NFL. And I'm expecting to see that next step, because year number 1, we always talk about with tackles that they can kind of still have some holding issues. They can have some sack issues. Most tackles in their first year are still kind of giving up that 5 to 7 sack range, just because they're still trying to get used to the NFL, and they're going up against basically the best of the best every single time that they go out there now, as opposed to college, where they could go like, oh, you've never had a sack ever in your career. All I'm going to do is just hold out my arm, and you're not going to be able to do anything. And I expect him to be a lot better, and I'm really, really excited to watch him. And yeah, he's a right tackle, but it's starting to show even more now today that right tackles are just as important as left tackles.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, you wouldn't be surprised to see him as a Pro Bowl finalist or a Pro Bowler come the end of the season. And we've seen good things from Darnell Wright, so I agree. I'm hoping to see that big growth from him going into this season. For myself, this is a bit of a strange pick. I could have gone with like Broderick Jones, but as I said, with him dealing with the injuries, it's hard for me to have those high expectations on him. You might not agree with this. This pick isn't all about the stat line. It's George Pickens. He showed last year what he can do when you get him the ball. He had almost 20 yards per catch.
He's
so it's not
explosive as hell.
Yeah, it's not his stats that I need to see that growth in. It is his maturity. George Pickens needs to mature fast now, yesterday. Like, he needs to grow the fuck up. He needs to stop throwing tantrums, period. Like, I don't care if you're getting double teamed or, there was a misread and the pass didn't come your way when you got open. You need to mature now. You want to be viewed as a number one in this league. You can't be throwing tantrums on the sideline. You can't be a diva like this. You need to grow the fuck up. It's simple as that. He needs to find a way to beat the inevitable double teams he's going to face, and he needs to step up and learn how to be a leader in that wide receiver room instead of a distraction. And that's where I expect to see the biggest growth, because as good as he is at putting up those numbers, he can
highlight reel catches,
a reception, like I said. If you can't grow your personality and become more mature, you're not going to be the number one on this going forward. You're not going to be the number one on any team. Look at the fall of past number ones for this team in history, and you're going to see what you need to do. Look at what's happened to Juju Smith-Schuster. Look at Chase Claypool. Look at Deontay Johnson. Do not follow in their footsteps. Look to the past. See guys like Heath Miller and Hines Ward. Learn from them. You go back even further to guys like just Lynn Swan.
Yeah.
Mirror those guys and what they did. Put in the work. Be mature. If you don't get the ball, go to your quarterback and, hey, I was open. Next time we run that play, look to me, because it's going to happen again. Simple as that. You don't need to be slamming your helmet. You don't need to be throwing a tantrum. Simple. Put it out there and go, hey, I was open. I can beat this guy. If we run this play again, I'm going to be there. We're going to get a 40-yard bomb for a touchdown. Let's do this. Leave it at that.
There's nothing that I agree with you or disagree with you on. Like, I know you said I might disagree. No. Like, the biggest thing that I've been saying with George Pickens the entire offseason is I don't think he's necessarily going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. I've already put that out there on these airways. For me, the big thing was, how are you going to be as a leader? You are, like, yeah, last year you weren't the number one receiver. It was Deontay Johnson. Well, guess what? He's not there anymore. You were getting mad at the double teams you were getting last year. Well, guess what, buddy? It's going to be a lot more this year. So, yeah, I've always looked at that and said, I 100% agree with you. If the biggest thing from him expectation-wise is the maturity. And if he can get mature, you guys then now have a number one wide receiver. But until that happens, he can never be a number one wide receiver because he doesn't show that maturity. So 110% agree with you on that one. Like, yeah, there was nothing there that I was shaking my head going, nope, don't agree with that. It's like, yeah, it's his maturity. He could have 10 catches this year for 150 yards, but if he showed that he was matured, then yeah, I think you would count that as a win. Maybe not a win because he had such few yards, but you know what I mean. Like, he could have, if he had 800 yards this year and 6 touchdowns, but the maturity level was at a different level, you'd be like, yeah, this is a great season. This is almost better than what we saw last year.
Yeah.
So now moving over to the defensive side of the ball, this is, funny enough, another draft pick that we saw from the Bears last year, and this was our second round pick, Gervon Dexter, the D tackle out of Florida. This is a guy that whenever we talk about the Matt Eberflus defense, we always talk about that 3-tech, that dominating 3-tech. The big thing with Gervon Dexter coming out of school was this guy could very easily become a Chris Jones level player. He has that skill set. He has the size. He has the skill. He has the work ethic. We just need to see him get there. I thought he got better throughout the season last year from the defensive side of things. I need to see him take that next step, and I think he's going to take that next step. I'm not saying he needs to go out there and have 10 sacks this season and, always be in the backfield. But let's say he has 10 plus tackles for loss, and then he has, 6 or 7. I don't know the amount of tackles for loss, but I would be able to look at it at the end of the year and go, that was a good or bad situation. But yeah, if he gets 5 sacks this year, I would be happy. Again, he's playing 3-tech, so he doesn't need to always be the guy getting after the quarterback. He just needs to be a force on that defensive line that also has Montez Sweat, that everyone knows that the offensive coordinators are going, we need to stop Montez Sweat. And if Gervon Dexter can go out there and just pick up that intensity and add that second guy out there on that defensive line, well, guess what? I talk about Montez Sweat having 12, 12 and a half. If Gervon Dexter picks his game up, he is going to get to that 15, like what you're saying, because guess what? You just can't look at Montez and go, that's all we need to block. If Dexter picks his game up, it's going like, okay, we got the dominant edge rusher and we got the dominant 3-tech. Look out.
Yep. No, 100%. That is a good one, and if he can pick up his game that way, that will be lights out for that Bears defense, because that's also going to take that pressure off Montez Sweat and make it easier for him to get those more sacks, and that'll also go back and it'll help out with Demarcus Walker as well, you know, in his improvements. So that's really good. For me, I said I was going to talk about this guy a little later, and that's Nick Herbig. I am excited about this dude. I know he's got a freaking mountain to climb as he is behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith on that depth chart, but this guy's shown he has the ability to be a special player. I know there's been some interesting talks and articles written that maybe the Steelers team decides to go with like a 3 edge rusher defense or something like that. Whether they do that or he's just able to get in there and relieve Highsmith and Watt more often, which is what I would do, because that will also add to the ability to keep those two guys healthy. But like in his rookie year, playing behind those two guys, he got 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles as basically the backup, which is really good. And then I know we say it all the time. We said it earlier. Preseason doesn't matter, blah, blah, whatever. In the 3 preseason games this year, Nick Herbig was hands down the best player on this Steelers team. 100%. He had 3.5 sacks in those 3 games and another forced fumble. So he keeps showing that he's growing, he's getting better, and we've got that depth at that edge rushing position where we can afford to say, hey, TJ, you're looking a little gassed. You've been out there all game, and they've been running it up on us. Sit down for a couple plays. Let's put
Please, for the
Herbig
love
in
of
there.
God, take a play off.
Right? Exactly. You know, and I expect to see him take big strides this year. Like, I don't have anything bad to say about this guy. You know, unlike Pickens, where I was like, I need to see him get better. Like, I expect this. I expect Nick Herbig to be better because he has already been so good, and I see nothing but good things for him going forward. This was a steal of a pick for the Steelers last year. He did great in his rookie year when he filled in for both Highsmith and Watt while they were injured throughout. And then to see the strides he's already made, I'm excited. If they decide to go with a 3 edge rush set, like, think about how scary that would be. I don't know how that would work since there's really only 2 edges out there.
Well, you would essentially have Alex Highsmith on one side, you would have TJ Watt on the inner side of the edge, and then you just have Nick Herbig on the outside edge of TJ Watt. And it's like that poor side of whatever TJ Watt and Herbig are rushing. It's like have fun. Yeah.
Exactly.
Bye-bye, quarterback.
Yeah, so I mean, it could be a scary, scary thing. You know, it could afford the ability to let TJ Watt be more like a Troy Polamalu and be like, hey, we're gonna have Herbig and Highsmith out there. You choose whatever hole you want to rush, TJ.
Yep.
You can pick and choose. You go, oh well, I think it's, you know, I'm gonna hit that B gap because it looks like that's gonna open up nicely for me. And
it allows TJ Watt to do what Myles Garrett did last year, of where he just basically said, I'm going to go against you, I'm then going to go against you, and then you, and then you, and I'm just going to kind of keep rotating, see who's having the worst day, and I'm just going to have fun with it.
Yeah, and so I am stoked to see what Nick Herbig is going to be able to do.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with Nick Herbig. He's going to be so much fun to watch because, again, when you have already 2 dominant edge rushers, and then you can have a 3rd edge rusher that's just going to be able to produce, again, you start to talk about silly things like that where you're like, hey TJ, do you just want to go find who's having the shittiest day and just make it even worse? And he's just going to go, yeah. Does a duck swim in water? Like, of course I want to go. Like, I'm already the best edge rusher in the NFL right now, so of course I'm just going to try to exploit that even more.
Yeah, I mean, you've also got the prospect of, oh, they're double teaming TJ Watt on this side. Okay, well, let's throw Nick Herbig on this side with Alex Highsmith. and let the two of them both have a free run at the quarterback, basically.
Yeah.
It's because, I mean, I didn't mention it, but still got Cam Hayward and Keanu Benton you got to block.
Mhm.
Like, you've got 5 guys you have to block on this D in this front 7 now. And so you can't
That
afford
OC
to be...
is going to have to basically just go, all right, so it's going to be snap, throw, ball. Snap, throw,
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah.
That's the game plan of how you beat this exciting edge rushing unit. But the last one that we are going to talk about for the players that we want to see is the rookie that we are really, really excited to watch for our teams this year. Now for the Bears, we only had 5 rookies that we had drafted. Now we had a few undrafted guys, but you know, it's undrafted guys are what they are. I can see you already having that grin of like, oh, I wonder who he's gonna pick.
I mean, there's 2. I'm wondering which one it's going to be that you're more excited to see.
And the guy that I'm most excited to see is the 5th round rookie Austin Booker. I know a lot of people are going to be sitting back going, how do you not choose Caleb Williams or Rome Odunze? Well, here's the thing. Caleb Williams was the 1st overall pick. He's considered a generational talent at quarterback. There's a reason that he was drafted 1st overall. Rome Odunze was in a class where you had 3 wide receivers that are also being talked about as being generational prospects. Rome Odunze is literally being compared to Larry Fitzgerald and Devontae Adams. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm not really worried about these 2 guys. I know what I'm going to see and expect from these guys. Now, with that being said, I know they're going to have some bumps and bruises, and I'm going to be really excited, but the entire conversation this offseason from when this rookie class, Torrey Taylor, really, really fun to watch. Like, he's going to arguably be one of the best punters in the NFL this year as a rookie. Like, that's what it's going to be. But Austin Booker intrigues me the most, and I'm most excited to watch him because coming out, Daniel Jeremiah said, this guy reminds me of Max Crosby. And looking at him and just the level of rawness, and Daniel Jeremiah said when the Bears drafted him, if Austin Booker stayed another year at Kansas, he was going to be a 1st round pick at the edge rushing spot. So if this guy, and I know I've spoken about Austin Booker, and I've said if he is 80% of what Max Crosby is at the NFL level, the Bears got a ridiculous steal. And what we've seen from him this offseason, all that tells me is he's going to be really good in a year. And he had 4.5 sacks this preseason, if I'm remembering correctly. He had 2.5 sacks against Buffalo, and I'm pretty sure the other 2 games he had a sack in each of those. He was just dominant. He's going to be in the rotation for this Bears D-line, and he's going to be really fun to watch. I won't be surprised if he somehow turns into the starting edge rusher opposite of Montez Sweat throughout the regular season. I am so excited to watch him. Like, again, we talked about Caleb. I'm excited to watch him. I'm excited to watch Rome Odunze, but I am ecstatic to watch Austin Booker because the Bears, we haven't really had one of those guys in a long time where it's just this long shot draft pick that was drafted in the middle of the draft that just turns into a stud. This could be the guy, and I'm just so excited to watch him play.
Yeah, and that did surprise me. I expected you to say Rome Odunze or Caleb Williams. I thought you might go home just because Caleb was the obvious pick, but no, that's a good one. I mean, we've talked a lot about that front 7 for your Bears and how they have potential to be a great lineup. And it's just a matter of figuring out who's going to be that complement to Montez Sweat. And watching the competition between these 2 guys is going to be interesting, and I think it's just going to push Austin Booker to be that much better.
Yeah. I'm excited, man. I'm really excited to watch him.
Yeah, I do not blame you. For myself, I am excited about Payton Wilson. Man, like...
That's kind of figured I figured that's where you were going to go.
100%. I mean, it might come back to bite me because this is the biggest cursed position that the Pittsburgh Steelers have had for years. In recent team history, this is the position that is a problem. That middle linebacker. but he is so explosive, so fast, so smart. He plays this game so well. Like, we talked about it when he got drafted. It's not likely that he's going to be a lengthy career guy. You know, he is missing that ACL, so that is a concern. That's why he fell so far in the draft, I believe. But the Steelers scooped him up, and for this rookie contract, he could be lights out at this position. And the fact that we got Patrick Queen, that means it doesn't have to just be Payton Wilson doing everything. You know, he's going to be able to rotate in with the depth that we have at that middle linebacker. And there was a bit of concern in preseason. You know, he was in protocol for a little bit there, which was concerning. But even when he was in there, still got 9 tackles. Like, he was all over the field. He is just so fast, so exciting to watch. And I hope he can stay healthy so that we can see what he is capable of. He's going to be a game changer for the Steelers team if he can stay healthy, because we've talked about that, the rest of that front seven already. Highsmith, Watt, Hayward, Benton. You know, I mentioned Herbig and maybe Leal if they get going. And then Patrick Queen in the middle of the field. If you add Payton Wilson to that, this could just be
It's just
so
a scary front seven.
scary to watch for other offenses. They're not going to want, it's going to be like old days. They won't want to go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. You know, and if the offense can stay on the field long enough to get these guys a rest, man, I'm so excited to see Payton Wilson. If he can stay healthy, we've got ourselves a special guy in the middle rounds that we didn't have to spend a first round pick on. I'm so happy here, man. This could be great to watch.
Yeah, the second that I saw Payton Wilson get drafted by the Steelers, it was like, I immediately texted you. I was like, that's a great pick. Like that,
Oh, yeah.
that is one of those picks that is just phenomenal. Because again, you look at it and go, the biggest position of need this offseason for the Steelers was linebacker. You go out and sign Patrick Queen, who was a very, very good middle linebacker, and then getting Payton Wilson, who was arguably the best middle linebacker in the draft, and then just say, okay, we know you have injury concerns, but we have guys in front of you where you're going to be used as that rotation, and just having all this stuff. Yeah, like, I knew pretty much from the entirety who you were going to choose in this conversation, because let's be honest here, like, it wasn't going to be a shock. Like, this was the guy.
No, 100%. You know, the only way it could have been a different guy is if Rowan Wilson had stayed healthy throughout preseason. Then maybe it might have been him. But with that injury, that solidified Payton Wilson for me.
Yeah, even with Roman Wilson, Roman Wilson.
I know there's too many Wilsons on this goddamn team.
I
feel like Tom Hanks in Castaway.
But yeah, I still felt like it was that. But the final thing that we have here on this definitely a little bit longer podcast is earlier in the offseason, we had a discussion of ranking our top from 1 to 32 starting quarterbacks. And so this is the list of the starting quarterbacks. I know we said we were going to either do it once every week or once every couple of weeks. I think it's probably once every couple of weeks, but we'll give you the update. And so just to quickly go through the list, because we did have some changes to this list because we have different starting quarterbacks at their position. So to quickly run through the list here, and then we'll talk about the changes. Mahomes at 1, Joe Burrow at 2, Josh Allen 3, 4 is Justin Herbert, 5 Lamar Jackson, 6 Dak Prescott, 7 Jared Goff, 8 Kirk Cousins, CJ Stroud at 9, Baker Mayfield at 10, Brock Purdy at 11, Jalen Hurts at 12, Tua Tagovailoa at 13, Aaron Rodgers at 14, Jordan Love at 15, Matthew Stafford at 16, Trevor Lawrence at 17, Kyler Murray at 18, Geno Smith at 19, Caleb Williams at 20, Derek Carr at 21, Gardner Minshew at 22, Deshaun Watson at 23, Russell Wilson at 24, Will Levis 25, Anthony Richardson 26, Jacoby Brissett 27, Sam Darnold 28, Jaden Daniels at 29, 30 Bryce Young, 31 Bo Nix, 32 Daniel Jones. And so pretty much The guys that we had to add were Bo Nix and Russell Wilson, because initially we had Justin Fields slotted in there. Justin Fields was slotted at 21, and we moved Russell Wilson down to 24. We had a little bit of discussion, but you initially had him at 23. I had him at 24, and then we compromised. We did move we did move Derek Carr and Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was initially head of Derek Carr, and we just kind of flopped them with Gardner Minshew kind of sticking in the middle. But then again, those guys all moved up a spot because we moved Justin Fields out and Russell Wilson in. But yeah, that is the quarterback discussion.
Yeah, and we wanted to do the top 32 starters. It was tougher to do before the draft when we did it initially, just because we didn't know who the starters were going to be. All the starters have been named now. I don't know if we'll necessarily do the full 32 every couple of weeks. If there's any significant changes in the top
we'll talk
5
about the
or
moves.
10, then we definitely will be discussing those. And then we'll probably revisit this closer to the mid-season point to do a full 32 layout.
Yeah, it's pretty much just going to be a short little section that pops up every week where we go, like, this is any moves that we have happen. It's pretty much just going to kind of be a last kind of minute of the podcast type thing of where we're just going to quickly jump like, hey, we've had a little bit of movement in our rankings. These are our rankings. These are where these were previously, and this, and that. But that is all for today's episode. A little bit of a longer one as we get ready to go back into the swing of things. We had a lot of things that we wanted to discuss this week. So for Sterling, I'm Brendan saying thank you all for joining us here at the 1IQ Football Talk podcast, and we will see you soon. Peace.